In 1634, a small French convent of nuns is struck by mass hysteria when visions of ghostly men are seen on the property. But chaos ensues when one nun suggests that the one causing the drama is none other than a handsome local priest who has made a pact with the devil. Hysteria leads to public exorcisms and a notorious witch hunt and trial that would shake the world of Catholic France and become known as the most famous case of its kind. This is the possession of Loudun.
Welcome to another episode of Hosting Evil. I'm Jess.
And I'm Emily. And I am so ready. We're going to finish this Halloween season with witches, a fire, a hunt, demons, possessions, etc.
Well, let's get right on into it. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. So, the story of the possessions at Loudun actually begins beforehand with the story of Father Urbain Grandier. And so Grandier was a Jesuit priest. He was born in 1590 in Bure, France. He attended the Jesuit college in Bordeaux, and in 1617 he was chosen to be the parish priest for this church in Loudun. And at the same time, he was also given a position as a canon to the College of the Church of the Holy Cross that is also located in Loudun. So this was actually a really big deal that this happened, though, because people were angry that he was selected for both positions, and it immediately created resentment because these were paid positions, and this is like, you have to remember, this is borderline feudal world. So
these were big issues back then.
Yeah, big issues back then. And it's also the idea that they weren't picking someone from within their town. And then there's also Grandier himself. He's reported to be both loud and charismatic. They were obsessed with his appearance, supposedly. He was really attractive.
Ooh.
He had what was basically described as a handlebar mustache that twirled up at the ends. But it was so funny because it was like, I guess they couldn't understand styling product at that time. And they literally thought that like that curl meant something. Like,
but really it's just like a porn stash.
Yeah, basically. But it's like God is holding up his porn stash, right?
Not the gel or
no gel or what, or like probably horse.
He did that
wax.
on purpose. He knew these people were gonna eat it up.
He knew that he was hot shit. And also, this is definitely going to be like our adult content episode.
Because of how good looking this guy is?
Because of how good looking he is, and because of the ways that he moved women, as you're going to hear about. So he was very attractive. It's also important to know that he was very educated because the Jesuits, in terms of religious orders, were really focused on education. He had the ability to go to a college where he learned more things. And as a result of that, it gave him the ability to kind of challenge church doctrine and the dogmas of the Catholic Church. And in a way, that's not necessarily uncommon. I mean, there's been, religious men and women who have done that over the centuries, but the issue is the way that he goes about doing this. So he created a lot of enemies because of his way of doing things. One of the things that he essentially did was he kind of wrote, I'm going to use the word treaty, like if you think about like Martin Luther, saying that celibacy for priests shouldn't be a thing. And his response was like, yeah, I took the vow of celibacy, but I'm
so
still
good
a
looking.
man. Like, I'm still a man. Do you really think I'm gonna follow
Listen, I
it?
think he was onto something. I think it could save a lot of problems down the line in the church.
I mean, this is like the 17th century
Yeah.
version of like boys will be boys though, too. It's a little awkward because you want to be like, okay, I can understand man, but you're also like, damn the man.
Damn.
Save the empire,
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So he's doing all of this, right? And he's already pissing people off. Even before he gets to Loudun. Then he also does something that's extremely inappropriate. He had some sort of relationship with the daughter of one of his good friends.
Oh, yeah. You don't do
And
that.
sometime around 1629 or 1630, she gives birth to a son that they're convinced is his. Okay.
So he potentially knocked her up too.
Yes. And I will say, like, you have to remember that this stuff was happening in the Catholic Church at this time. I mean, there's like popes that were reported to like be married
Fathers of
and fathered children.
Yeah.
But it's especially for Grandier, it's going to be controversial.
Sure.
And the other thing is that this friend of his, Louis Trinquant, he is the prosecutor for town. So he's making enemies out of the wrong people.
Yeah, he's burning bridges.
Quick. Fast. Then there was another act that leads to his eventual undoing. And that's when he falls in love with this beautiful woman, Madeleine de Barrau. And she's the unmarried daughter of a wealthy nobleman. He somehow convinced her to marry him and supposedly even did the marriage ceremony himself.
Can you do that?
No, but I mean, could you do anything that he was doing? Like, clearly he didn't have a problem with breaking the rules.
Was he a sociopath? I'm seeing charming, intelligent.
Narcissistic,
Yeah,
probably.
he's got all the traits.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. But the other issue is that when he convinces this Madeleine to marry him, he pissed off another person, this man named Pierre Menoir, who was an advocate for King Louis XIII. So he's kind of like not just pissing off people in the church, but he's also now going against people that support the regal nature of France.
Yeah, he's pissing off all the wrong people.
Yeah. So in June of 1630, he was actually arrested for immorality and he was found guilty of it. But because he had so many connections, they had like tried to revoke his privileges as a priest. But essentially, because of all his connections, it didn't go anywhere and he was restored. And they even tried him in non-secular court because the guys who were going after him in the first place were mad and they're like, we need to nail him for this. So when they try him in non-secular court, the people that had made testimonies about him before, they actually went and recanted what they said because I guess they like didn't want him to get in trouble.
Yeah.
It's really weird. So all of this is going on. Okay. And then at that time, there's this convent of Ursuline nuns that's located in Loudun. And they're raptured with the gossip about his exploits of this handsome Father Grandier. And it's the same way that it moves around town, it's going to move around in the convent. And so just a little bit of information for people who don't know. So at this time, the nuns are being kept in a cloister, meaning that they're not allowed to leave the convent grounds. And so the Ursulines, they were educators and they would have schools, but it was like the children had to come to the convent and then leave. And that was how it worked. And then the other thing too is like during this time period, essentially, for the most part, a lot of young women became nuns because they weren't attractive enough to be married off, or if their families weren't wealthy enough to purchase a dowry for them, it was easier
Just to slip in here. So they
send
might
them
have
to
had
the nunnery.
all the feelings that a young woman might have. So this is getting them all hot and bothered with this guy.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's not like they started their lives off at the age of like 6 saying like I'm going to become a nun one
No,
day.
it just happened once
You
they
know.
realized.
So now we have to talk about Jean d'Angers. Jean was a French Ursuline nun. She was born to a noble family in 1602. Supposedly, as a child, she suffered from some disease in childhood that stunted her growth and gave her a hunch.
So the family was rich, but because she's got a hunch, this is why she ended
Yeah.
up at the convent.
This you'll
Okay.
say, yeah. But basically, they knew from the start
She wasn't going anywhere.
that she
other
wasn't
than that.
going anywhere. No. So, and as a result of her physical limitations, so to speak, she was really withdrawn and defensive during childhood. So at one point, her family just decided to send her to a nearby abbey where she had an aunt who was a prioress. And then after 3 years there, the aunt sends her back.
She's like, nope.
So I guess it wasn't really working out
out.
for her there. So, like we've already pointed out, her lack of attractiveness kind of like killed her prospects for marriage. And also, I kind of feel like her parents saw her as insufferable because of this attitude that she had.
Yeah, so she was not nice and she wasn't attractive.
No. So they decided that she would enter an Ursuline convent, which she did. And so that's where she took the religious name Jean d'Angers, which
At least she had a pretty name.
I know, right? Well, yeah. Not that personality, though.
No.
So she gets to the convent. She's not very well liked,
Of course.
right? But everyone tolerates her because they know that her family's wealthy, which, like, that still goes on.
Well, I'm sure she had also that air about her too, which didn't help her case in being liked.
Yeah, right. I'm sure. And so what's funny is she wrote her own autobiography later in life. And so she admitted that she pretended to be kind at one point. And like when she wrote it, she was kind of like mocking them for what they really thought about her by saying like, "Oh, you thought I was so nice, but listen to this, bitches."
She went off in her autobiography.
Yeah.
Okay, now I kind of like her.
So she writes in her autobiography, she pretended to be kind and she made herself indispensable because she knew that the current Mother Superior, or also called a prioress, was going to be retiring. And so this is at Loudun. And so there, she made herself valuable enough that when the Mother Superior retired, she named Jean as the replacement.
She did not.
She became the Mother Superior at the age of 25.
Wow.
For this order. So that means like she's in charge of the whole convent. Okay? And I mean, there could be like up to 40 young women
Under her, yeah.
Under her.
Under her.
And I mean, you have to think like a lot of them were probably older. I mean, whatever older
Than her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have been like 40, taking.
And she's in her 20s.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and can you imagine like being 25
And having that much authority
right
over people, especially when you're pretending to be nice?
Yeah, right? That's a lot of work, too. It is important to note that Jean remained Mother Superior for all but 3 years, from 1627 until her death in 1665.
So she had a long reign.
A long reign. But she would also do extreme things. So here's another like crinkle in her personality where she would do extreme things to show her spirituality and the depth of it. And one of the most common things that she would do is she would fake states of rapture and ecstasy to prove herself as like spiritual to the nuns.
So she was dramatic.
Very dramatic. You're getting inklings. You're getting small notes of her drama. But she was really dramatic. And a part of that drama was being sexually obsessed with Father Grandier. Okay? And she compared her impure thoughts for the priest to be the worst disorder of demons ever created in her.
That's a powerful statement right there.
right? Yeah, it's extreme. So she's like ruminating on this obsession. And then, like meanwhile, the rumors are going on about him and everything. In 1632, the confessor that the Ursuline nuns had, Canon Moussant, he dies. And so Jean sees this as an opportunity. She's going to get Father Grandier into her
She
clutches.
set her
She
sights.
is ready. So she writes him a letter, asks very nicely if he would like to come. And I mean, come on, like he's a womanizer and there's a convent of nuns.
Just wanting him to come.
Yeah.
They need him. Oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Or maybe I did. I don't know.
I
Maybe
think you
I
did.
think
I think that's what
probably it was
they
really
did,
reality.
right? I can't believe that was perfect. So she writes him this letter. She thinks he's going to be so ready to say yes. And instead he declined.
Oh, God, that probably like threw her into a tizzy.
Well, first he said he wasn't worthy of the post.
Oh,
Which, like,
come on.
I actually kind of give him credit for that. I kind of give him credit, At least he's admitting his limitations.
Or I'm taking it as he's saying that because he wants her to beckon even more.
We'll just wait. So he says that he wasn't worthy of the post, and he also says that he's too busy.
Okay, well that I can believe.
That, I mean, he should have just put that first, but it's always your second excuse.
Well,
that's
narcissists
really,
always want to make sure that, they're touting themselves up too and making other people tell them how great they are.
right. That's true. So she's outraged, though. She's pissed that he doesn't come. And immediately at that point, she decides that she will make herself his enemy.
Oh, she turned real fast.
Quick as day and night. Totally opposite. Flip a switch that they didn't have back then, and she's someone else.
Is she going to conjure the devil?
No. Instead, she decides to go to Father Mignon. And he openly hates Father Grandier.
So she went to someone who hates him to get him on her side.
To ruin him. She's creating her burn book.
Right. She's finding all the people that already hate him too.
Exactly. Okay. So she has a new confessor for the church. And now she sets about doing something else. Now, in the past, Jean would tell the other nuns about her having inappropriate dreams. And actually, when Canon Moussant had died, she said that she had a dream that he came up from purgatory and asked for prayers. And so she had told the sisters about that. Then she's having this dream of this man coming to her and kind of talking about explicit and sexual things. She mentioned this. They already kind of knew this. But then she starts to claim that Grandier is appearing in her dreams and that he caressed her, told her he loved her, and pressed her to have sex with him.
All in her dream.
All in her dream.
And she's telling everyone this.
And she's telling everyone this. So then the other nuns are hearing these stories, and they start to claim that they're having similar dreams about other clergy. Not necessarily Grandier right now, but just other clergy.
Do you think they were just feeding into her? Or
Hysteria.
Yeah, that mass hysteria.
Her hysteria, 100%. There's no way, because it catches too fast, right?
Like, it's like wildfire. It's spreading very quickly.
Exactly. So the other thing that's kind of crazy is there was a rumor that the convent that they're living in was actually haunted.
Shut up.
Yeah. And they would see shadowy figures of men moving around at night.
Men.
Yeah, specifically men.
Specifically men.
Specifically. I mean, who else would be wandering around a convent at night?
But a man.
Except for shadowy men.
Of course.
Right? Okay, so there's also an aside that goes to this whole story and that really plays into this entire case of possessions, exorcisms, and then eventual witch trial, which is, we have to remember that this is France in the 1630s. The Reformation has already happened, so the Catholic Church is feeling as if it's under attack by Protestantism, and then specifically in France, you have the Huguenots that are kind of battling with the Catholics. And so under Louis XIII, his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, and if you've ever seen, like, The Three Musketeers, he's most often the cardinal used in that. So I was doing my research and I was like, "Why
That
do I
sounds
know this
familiar.
so well?" So Richelieu, he's one of those politics meets church, like, this is definitely not a country that has any thoughts in the separation from church and state. And so he's focused on cutting down the power that the nobility have. He's just trying to, like, really control people, but also he's, like, trying to strengthen France. There's a lot of clergy that come into this case that are making decisions that aren't necessarily making them for, like, the betterment of the people involved. It's really just about, like, control and
And
manipulation.
power.
And power, yeah. Okay, so back to the nunnery where they're having all of these crazy sexual dreams and they're thinking that there's ghosts of men, running around at
God, if
night.
convents were like that, I would have joined.
um
No, I'm dead serious.
so when Minon, I'm always gonna say it wrong. Minon. So when Minon learned of the nun's dreams, he doesn't discourage them either. He doesn't try to, like, quiet them. He doesn't try to, like, put an end to it. Instead, he starts to reinforce what they're dreaming and he characterizes the visions that they're having in their dreams as incubi that are being sent by Satan. So incubi, that's the plural form of the word incubus, and an incubus is a lewd demon that pursues women for sex. Now, this is an old gendered definition, but essentially, it's the idea of it being a male form. Then you might know succubus that are usually women. So he's feeding into all of it. And then he goes a step further and he starts to make the claim that it's Grandier who's bewitching the nuns. So now everyone is starting to hear in the French countryside that there's an order of Ursuline nuns in Loudun that are being plagued by demons, and the demons are blaming stuff on Grandier. So here we have this satanic frenzy begin. And once that starts, then the nuns start to have more symptoms.
Of course. Need to amp it up now.
Exactly. So they start to writhe and speak in tongues.
That's where you go with that.
Now, what's also funny about this is, like, education obviously was not anything near what it is now.
Well, and these nuns, I would say most of them didn't come here because they were called to lead a religious life. It's because they couldn't get married off. So they didn't
Right.
have it in their heart, I guess, so to speak. So you're really setting the stage for, I mean, they're bored too.
Chaos. Yeah. But, like, so one of the really funny things is about them speaking in tongues. Like, there are parts where the priests were trying to speak to them in Latin to speak to the
demons,
so-called
yeah.
demons. Well, the nuns don't even know Latin.
So they're just
So
speaking
they
gibberish.
couldn't even yeah, and I guess that's why they said they were speaking in tongues, because all of a sudden, if you're speaking in gibberish,
Yeah. What kind of credibility do you have at that point?
Exactly, yeah. So Mignon decides to call in a Carmelite priest, two of them, and they're gonna perform an exorcism. And so when he did this, he actually picked for two magistrates to come and to be witness to everything. Because honestly, already at this point, like, he was setting a plot. And his plot is to take Grandier down. He's using the possession of these
As a
nuns
platform for that, yeah.
as his platform. So during the exorcism, Jean contorted violently and grunted like a pig. And then she went on to reveal that she was under the influence of diabolical plots. And the demons that were present in her claimed that one day she had picked up a bunch of roses that she had found thrown over the convent wall, and she had placed it in the belt of her habit. And the demons Asmodeus and Zebulon, they claimed that by accepting those roses, Jean had become bewitched with the obsessive love for Grandier. So the claim was that Grandier did the spell, threw these roses over the convent wall. She picked up the roses, and now she's possessed. Yes.
Gotcha. So flowers showing up on your doorstep, you should not take if you don't know who they're from.
You got to make sure they have a card, right? I mean, that's...
Love Satan.
Yeah, right? If it says love Satan, maybe don't return it, or maybe...
If it's Steve next door, go ahead, take them.
If it's questionable, yes, Steve, the guy next door, okay, fine. But yeah, just don't put them under your belt.
You don't do that.
Yeah, because
who the hell puts flowers under their belt anyway?
That would have been, and that, like, we can assume would be very close to her genital area, right? So there's also that part of it. So Mignon is pushing the nuns and their possessions and their claims against Grandier. And he even goes as far as to compare this situation to a case that had happened 20 years before, which I'm sure we'll cover it one day. And that was another case of Ursuline nuns in France.
Oh my God, what's with this order?
Being possessed, and it actually led to the execution of a priest.
Get out.
So he has this book about the possessions, or has this information, and supposedly, like, gives it to Jean, and she reads it, and then it's almost as if a lot of the things that were talked about in the book are her actual symptoms.
Oh, coincidence? I don't think so.
Right. It's almost as if it doesn't make sense.
Jeez.
So Grandier initially was like, this is just weird. He's a hoe bag and he knows it, but he also knows that he's not
causing this.
Yeah, like he knows,
and he's intelligent.
Not guilty. Right. He's educated. He probably thinks like this will wash over. But what he's not understanding is that there's just like this pool of people who hate him, who are going to do everything they can to take him down. Actually, what he does is he reaches out to the Archbishop of Bordeaux, and he gets the Archbishop to send doctors to examine the women to see what's going on. And so the Archbishop's doctors actually find no evidence of possession, and he makes them stop the exorcisms.
Wow. So was there any nun at this point that was just like sitting back, eating popcorn, watching all this, or was every last one of them?
Yeah, so there were definitely nuns that weren't involved, because like I saw something that said like up to 17.
And there was 40 there, right?
But there was definitely more. There was definitely more than 17 nuns in the convent. So yeah, there's a lot of moments where you have to wonder, why didn't anyone step in and be like,
stop your nonsense.
Yeah, cut it out. You're
getting kicked out.
Yeah, like go home. I mean, and maybe because like a lot of the nuns they all came from wealthy families, they're not going to like bug their noble families with these problems. It's in some ways because it's a world that is just so different than ours.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand, but it does make you question, where were their thoughts going?
Yeah,
what were they thinking? So the Archbishop of Bordeaux has them stop the exorcisms and has the nuns confined in their cells. But
In their cells?
in their cells. So their
Okay.
rooms. Yeah. Sorry, just to make that clear.
I was like, "Did I miss
Yeah,
your"
that's in convents.
Gotcha.
That's what they would call their rooms. And I mean, it's 1630, what, 1632. So they're probably sleeping on straw. Maybe if they're wealthy, they might have like a
A mat?
better
Yeah.
bed. But, like this is really like primitive living circumstances.
This is like there's no room at the inn, the manger type setup is what I'm
For
picturing,
sure,
yeah.
yeah. And I mean, they definitely weren't taking baths all the time, Like, I'm just happy I wasn't born
Yeah,
then.
me
They tried to stop it. Grandier tried to do what he could. Mignon is still fighting hard to go after him and wants him torn apart. So then he brings in a Franciscan and a Capuchin friar, and he knows that these two that he invited, they really believe in like the demonics. So that's the thing, like he starts to bring in more people that are on his train of thought, that are ready to take the crazy train to Witch Hunter Alley.
manipulation. And that's really manipulating the situation, though.
100%. And that's the crazy thing about all of this is like, it's not just one manipulative person.
It's
It's like
many.
27
Mhm.
of them. And, it's the nuns being manipulative, it's the priests. So by the autumn of 1633, King Louis actually agrees that there should be a commissioner to investigate and decide whether or not to put Grandier on trial. And by November of 1633, he's arrested and imprisoned until his what will be eventual torture and execution.
So they got him.
They got
They
him.
got him.
They got him. He was
Pretty boys in
accused
jail.
pretty boys in jail.
Not a good place where you wanna be with
And
that
not
type of
looking that
face.
much pretty. And in the movie The Devils, they shave his entire body. So they strip him of his nice mustache.
Oh, no. His
And
claim to fame.
right, and I just thinking, like, that must have taken a lot of work to grow.
Yeah. Especially if
And
it's
to
twirling
prime,
and yeah.
right? Yeah. Um, so he is accused of sorcery, and then he's also accused of consorting with the devil and his demons and other witches at their sabbats. And that's where we get to, like, another specific thing about this whole case is because this court case, so to speak, that's going on, or this witch trial, um, it actually created a lot of controversy within the Catholic Church and within the doctrine. And it kind of reflects on the flaws of their own investigation, like this controversy or confusion. Because the ones who were prosecuting him were using the Malus Maleficarium. So, like, if you've ever heard about the Salem witch trials, you
Mhm.
might recognize that name. And so it's also known as the witch hammer. And it's a witch hunter's guide that was published in Germany in 1487. And it was written by the inquisitors of the Catholic Church during that time. But also, that was like in itself a questionable situation, set of circumstances. So in this book, it says that any dreams, gossip, testimony can be used to condemn a witch, and that even the demons occupying the body could point blame at someone else.
That's an interesting set of guidelines right there.
Right? But what's crazy about that is because it actually goes against Catholic Church doctrine, because Catholic Church doctrine would say that Satan is the father of lies.
Yeah, he lies all the time in all the
Right.
possession cases we will cover.
Right. And anything that is said by a demon during a possession is inherently false, and especially during an exorcism.
But they're saying in this trial, go ahead and believe everything coming out of
The demon's
yeah.
mouth. Yes. And is it really, I mean, it's debatable whether it's really the demon's mouth. But yeah, I mean, they're saying take it all. Take it all in.
It's all
Right?
fact.
So this totally conflicts with all of this. But my thinking when I was reading this is I was like, this proves how freaking wrong they are for what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because, it's like they're Catholic priests and they're even going against Catholic teaching
Yeah.
just to convict someone.
And using the devil's words as fact in a trial to try a human.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Eyewitness
Exactly.
Satan
Yeah.
on the stand.
Yeah.
Like, what? That doesn't even make sense.
The devil's advocate.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing too. The devil's advocate. Like everyone should look into it. If someone's becoming a saint, they would really have a person that would play the devil's advocate and like argue all of the reasons why that person isn't a saint.
Wow.
And I don't know when it cut off, but I don't think they do it anymore.
No.
But it definitely went like into
Pretty
more
far.
contemporary times. Yeah. So there's all of these priests that are using manipulation to get what they want. And Cardinal Richelieu is looking at this whole trial and the hysteria as a way to strengthen the Catholic Church and France, and especially because the church is under attack. And it was even used against the Protestant Huguenots because the nuns are saying in these moments of exorcisms that the Huguenots were the disciples of Satan.
Oh my God.
So there's this ongoing examination of witnesses and the exorcisms of the sisters. It's just ongoing. And actually, at one point, Richelieu decided that they would no longer do the exorcisms within the convent, and they actually went and carted the nuns to like different parish churches to show the exorcisms.
Oh, and so spreading the hysteria everywhere too.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, he was like, well, we're spreading the quote unquote awareness of the devil and his activity. But yeah, I mean, he's just creating
hysteria everywhere.
Everywhere. The trial goes on. Richelieu even had one of his own personal doctors inspect the nuns, and his purpose was to identify where the demons were in their bodies. So I didn't realize this before even doing this research, but a demon can pick like a specific part, and that's where they just inhabit, and they might cause pain from there, or they might create some side effects. So there were at least 6 sisters that were identified as having multiple demons in multiple regions of their bodies. And I started to list off the names of the demons.
It's too much.
It's too much.
It's
too much. And God bless them. They didn't know Latin, but they knew every freaking demon. Like they knew every evil in the mythology of like demons, right? So then, because the nuns really are not experiencing possession anymore, but they're still being dragged around and being forced to put on this show, they actually started to name other individuals as practicers of witchcraft, and they even accused some of the priests of rape. So it's like, I mean, just like when people use that thing and they say like, oh, it was a witch hunt, like they're just going after
everybody.
Everyone. There's only one person that they're focused on, and that's Grandier. And then the other issue too is that there's actually people who recognize that this isn't real. Like these possessions aren't real. The exorcisms look fake. And there was also the problem as well because so they used to have students come to the convent And then all of a sudden, the convent turns into a place of exorcisms. So then the nuns start losing money because they're not having their students anymore.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, would you wanna send your kid
No.
to a school where, like,
Mass hysteria was happening, sexual
yeah,
behaviors.
exorcisms at night, mathematics for boys during the
Daddy,
day or
no.
whatever, There's all of these issues going on for the nuns, and at one point, it was proven that their behaviors did not even meet the church's set criteria for possession. But rather than putting an end to things, the priests would just start to create excuses, and they would say, well, that's because Grandier is doing this dark magic and he's making them so that they can't speak Latin. They could never speak Latin.
No. Because
But
they weren't possessed by demons, most likely, who can speak Latin.
right, exactly. Exactly. So, on August 18, 1634, Grandier was convicted and sentenced to be tortured and burned alive at the stake,
Oh my god.
and that his ashes would be scattered to the winds. Now, just remember, he's been locked up
This whole time.
this whole time since basically the November the year before. And so they bring him to public. He actually goes and makes this incredibly eloquent speech of his innocence of the crime of performing witchcraft. He admits everything that he did with, like, the women, like, getting people knocked up and, like, screwing around. Like, he admits to all of his philandering,
Yeah.
but he will not admit to the witchcraft. So the next step in this process is the question extraordinaire, or the extraordinary questions. And basically, this was something that this was a form of torture that they would put people through, knowing that it was fatal, but not fatal enough to immediately kill them. And so they would torture someone practically to death, knowing that they were just going to kill them after.
Oh my god.
It's really
brutal.
terrible. And
to think of all the innocent people that were up there that had this happen to them.
well, yeah, right. Like, anytime you hear about the witch trials in any country, in any culture, like, this is happening. And it was crazy to me because sometimes I had to remind myself, like, this is France. This is Catholic France. This isn't Puritan England, like, this isn't like James the First being afraid of, like, the witches sinking his ship. A totally different culture than what is so commonly in the witch trial lexicon, but it's all the same. They shaved his entire body. They put him in some barbaric medieval torture chamber. They did a lot. They did a lot of, like, really terrible, gross, like, bad things to him. And it was all trying to get him to confess. They tortured him for at least, like, 3 to 4 hours. And he would not confess to witchcraft. And eventually they just gave up on it and were like, okay, I guess we're not going to get what we want, so we're just going to kill you anyway because we're here,
Might as well just do you in.
I guess we might as well, like, just finish this party. What they actually did is, a part of his sentence was that he had to they took him to the Ursulines, and he was supposed to apologize to them and confess to them for what he did wrong.
So they didn't get a confession during, like, all the waterboarding and medieval torture things that they did, but let's just go take him there and see if he says I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And he tells the Ursulines that he did them no harm and that he could only pray.
My only crime was being good looking.
Exactly. Literally, he said he could only pray that God could forgive them for what they did. Which, honestly, though, I mean, I didn't like him at first.
I can see why someone would say that. I mean, the stuff he had just been through, torture-wise, because of them.
Yeah. And if you really did, you would admit it. You would admit it. Even if you didn't do it,
most people do admit it, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to get out of that torture.
Right.
Would he have lived if
No.
he had okay, so
No.
he would have he was gonna die.
But still, I mean,
just to end the torture.
Yeah. So then they brought him to the place of Saint Cross, and that's where he was surrounded by spectators. And this was also really bizarre reading this section of the research. So the Capuchin friars who were preparing the stake, they continued to exorcise all of the materials because they were convinced that the demons within him would like
Transfer?
prevent him from dying in a sense, or like prevent him from feeling like they were convinced that like if you are possessed or if you have Satan within you, that he will protect you from feeling pain and such, right? So they're continuously exercising the area to make sure that he'll still feel pain
During his death.
during his death. And they said that actually a couple of times he tried to speak while he's attached to the stake, and they would just throw holy water at him.
Oh my God.
Because they didn't want to hear the devil's words. They're repeatedly performing exorcisms, and eventually he just burns, and he burned to death and died. And there was actually a monk who claimed that he witnessed a large fly that buzzed around his head, Grandier's head, and that was proof that it was Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies, who was there to take his soul to hell. So I mean, like, even in this man's final moments of life, they're still convinced.
Yeah, they're still finding ways to justify what they just did.
Yes. So, just to wrap this all up, right? If all of this isn't crazy enough, he's dead, okay?
Done. Ashes.
It didn't end the possessions at Loudun.
Of course not, because these girls are crazy.
Instead, the convent would perform exorcisms as a type of a tourist attraction. And twice a day.
Shut up. They did not. They capitalized on it.
Twice a day, except for Sundays.
Of course. It's like Chick-fil-A, closed on Sundays.
Right? The possessed nuns were exorcised for the crowds, and they would lift their skirts and beg for sexual relief, and they would beat their heads, bend backwards, walked on their hands, used foul languages.
Also, they learned acrobatics in this point to really amp up the crowd.
I mean, you would have to think with all that writhing, they're probably getting like really
They're
good
getting like
core
some
muscle.
abs. Yeah.
They probably have like core muscles of steel. And they would stick out blackened tongues.
So they would color their tongue?
Yeah. They were putting on a show.
Oh, they were actresses.
Supreme.
They should have went into theater, not the nunnery.
They couldn't have even gone.
They were too ugly, yeah, I know.
Women weren't even in theater back then. If they were uglier, they probably would have been able to be
circus,
men, right?
That would have been a good spot for them.
So this all even continued until 1637, when Cardinal Richelieu's niece alerted him that it was still going on, and he put an end to it, and he stopped paying the salaries of the performers. Exactly. Like,
wait, are they even nuns anymore at this point? Like, what religious life are they doing?
I don't even know.
The answer's no.
Yeah. So one of the crazy things about this is like all of the different ways that they would go about trying to accuse Grandier of influencing or affecting the nuns. So at one point, it seemed like they were giving the nuns some sort of medication that would make them vomit. And then they were going through their vomit and claiming that there was, a pact from the devil.
Wait, they were rifling through the vomit?
They were rifling through the nuns' vomit to find what they thought was like Grandier infecting them, right? They claimed that there was a pact with the devil and several demons that he had signed that was just, I don't know, torn up in these nuns' vomit. But the best part about it, this is the part that killed me.
This is the part that killed you. Okay, I'm ready.
that Grandier's semen was in their vomit because he had the power to make his semen pass through walls. Because remember, he had
And
been
into mouths.
locked up at this point, and he had the ability to make his semen pass through the walls and into the bodies of these nuns.
He must have been so good looking if that could happen.
We'll make sure to have pictures of him because
yes, please.
I picked the story, and at first I was like, here's the thing. I was set on it. I knew I wanted to do a mass case. Like, I knew I wanted to do a lot. And then I started to write about it, and I was like, is this too crazy? Like, Jess is going to think I'm so stupid for picking this case with all of this ridiculousness. And then I kept going, and I just thought, no.
This is way too good. This is
People
like
need
gold.
to know about this.
Even if, do you think that they were really possessed?
Fuck no.
No. But other people did.
Right.
And that, led them to act a certain way and believe certain things.
And I definitely... we'll talk about it in another episode, but there were definitely some elements of bringing in evil.
Well, yeah, because if you start out and there's no evil present, but you start manifesting that, well, if I'm
It's
a
for the
demon
show.
hanging out, I'm going to be like, yo, that's where I'm going.
Exactly.
And I'm going to go and influence. Because that
Yeah.
can happen. And that's most times how possessions sometimes do happen, is by
Right.
someone, conjuring it up and...
Or opening
opening the
themselves
door.
up to it. So Jean actually knows a lot about that. So we'll learn about that in her story.
Well, I'm excited to hear all about her next time you go.
That's right.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Hosting Evil. For more information on this case and others, you can visit our website at hostingevilpodcast.com.
And don't forget to check us out on social media at Hosting Evil Podcast.
Until next time, I'm Jess. Peace, love, and light.
And I'm Emily. Keep fighting those demons.
Hosting Evil is recorded and produced by Carly Strange at Rockdale Studios.